Intervention biases. One intervention bias is allocation bias. That means there's some difference between the groups. This may be on purpose or it may be by accident. The things you're looking for are random group allocation. Was there some way of randomly assigning participants between the groups? If the investigators are really worried about keeping the groups even for something, they might do matching or stratified randomization, where they're distributing people based on specific characteristics. After they've assigned groups, you want to see that they've tested for baseline equality, that they've done something to compare the two groups to verify that they're actually starting in the same place. And if they do find some kind of difference between the groups at baseline, you'd like them to do something like an ANCOVA when they do their analysis to account for these potentially confounding variables. In contamination, participants in the control group receive the intervention that's being studied. So this is a very specific problem. This happens when you don't isolate the groups, so the control group can see what the intervention group is getting and maybe even follow along when they're getting the intervention. The things that you look for are having the groups isolated and treatment fidelity, not just for the intervention group, but also for the control group. In co-intervention, participants in either of the groups are getting any other form of intervention. So this may be medicine or other treatments, other exercise, that's any sort of uncontrolled additional treatments. For example, in a lot of studies on exercise, they will ask participants not to engage in any other forms of regular exercise. The ways that investigators try to reduce the risk of co-intervention is through things like the inclusion-exclusion criteria. So in excluding people based on other activities they're engaged in, using random group allocation to try to balance out the risk of co-intervention across both of the groups, stratified randomization and matching to be a little more aggressive about balancing out co-intervention. Timing bias happens when an intervention is applied either too soon, so before it can work, or too late, after it could possibly work. In studies involving people with stroke, there are some treatments that you want to initiate very quickly to take advantage of plasticity before the condition sets in, before the condition hardens. What you want to find in this case is, what you're looking for in this case is treatment fidelity. In chronological bias, what we're worried about is when the study happened in terms of things like seasonal bias. Were they looking at a walking intervention in the dead of winter, for example? Also, whether the study happened over a very long period of time with children, for example. If you're studying 5-year-olds, an intervention that takes a whole year to complete is taking up a very large part of that child's life. So it's hard to eliminate just aging and maturation in that case as part of the outcome. In other cases, we're worried about, well, was the intervention applied long enough? Maybe it didn't work, but was that because they just didn't give it enough time to work? One thing to look for with this is a control group that can balance out any issues with aging and maturation. You'd expect both the groups to have that same effect for maturation, so that isolates the effective intervention in the intervention group. Proficiency bias can cut two different ways. In a study where there are more than one therapist providing the intervention, or more than one sites where the intervention is happening, or one group is getting one kind of intervention from one group and from one therapist in one place, another group is getting a different kind of intervention from a different therapist in the other place. Were the therapists equally skilled? Uh, were the sites equal and consistent? Uh, you don't want the fact that one group gets a really great therapist or gets to do the study in a really great site to influence the results compared to the other group that maybe doesn't get treatment from as skilled a therapist. Another concern with proficiency bias is if there was only one therapist or one site, are those results going to generalize beyond that? Was there something special about that therapist or that site that made the results successful? In the Hawthorne effect, what we're worried about is participants just getting better because they're getting attention. And you'll occasionally see in a research study, the intervention group gets the intervention they're interested in, and the control group, instead of just getting usual care or just being sent home until they're brought back for the follow-up testing, they get some kind of active control condition, something they're brought in for some educational sessions or something else that isn't expected to benefit them in the same way the intervention group is, but still gives them the same amount of attention that that intervention group is getting. The interaction of treatment and setting, here we're worried about, well, was it something about the combination of the location and the environment that made the intervention more successful than it otherwise would have been? And really the only way to know that this isn't a problem is to see the study replicated in a different environment. Similarly, with interaction of treatment and history, what we're worried about is, well, a study that was done previously, is that time period that it was done in similar enough to today to actually still apply? And this can come up particularly with technology kind of interventions. A study that involved cell phones maybe 10 years ago might have different results than a study today because cell phones have changed significantly over the last 10 years.